Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I cannot see any of your faces on this side because of the light. So thanks for joining us today for the Secrets of an IT Insider. And if anyone wants to steal this slide deck after, we've left our logo off unintentionally. So you can use it in your own companies if you like. So just a quick introduction. I'm Keri Corbin. I'm the Vice President of Client Solutions for Barcoding Incorporated. Way back when I got my degree and first got into IT, I kind of started on the business and customer side, and then I moved into project management, anything from application and infrastructure project management. I've done service management, mergers and divestitures, kind of everything on the process and services side of IT. And so what I've brought to barcoding is that customer experience. It was kind of a natural match for us for me to start working at barcoding. You know, our tagline is be efficient, accurate, and connected, and that very much aligns with my personal brands kind of throughout my career. So if you guys are ready, we can, I didn't flip it. There's everything I kind of told you guys. We can go ahead and get started. So a survey said that 94% of what needs focus right now is around labor and productivity. So we can implement all the systems and all the robotics and all the innovation in the world, but if the end users aren't satisfied, we're not getting anywhere. So how do we approach labor, productivity, and user satisfaction in a world of digitalization? Dishes. Naturally, you guys expected for my next slide to show dishes, right? Raise your hand if your sink must be clean before the end of the night. Anybody? Yeah. Raise your hand if you really don't care either way. Yep, perfect. Listen, there is no right answer. I will admit, I was the person who did not want to have a single dish in my sink before bed. I just couldn't even sleep. And then I became a bonus mom. A husband and 3 teenage children moved into my house, and all of a sudden, everything that I ever knew about dishes in a sink was questioned by these other people in my home. I really didn't understand it. It seemed very logical to me. Having a clean sink was literally a reflection of how my life was going. My very well thought out plan was this. My son would take the trash out, our daughter would do the dishes, I had to buy products, and that was it. And for 4 years, I would live in this dreamland where I would never have a dish in my sink again. Until I realized that the people in my home actually had the audacity to have a different opinion on the exact same topic, dishes in the sink. I was really confused. How could it be that 4 people all had a different opinion on dishes in the sink? Like, how could I have missed this line of questioning when I was dating my husband? Clearly, it's something that needs to be covered. So I needed everything in order because, as most women know, your fear is someone's going to come over to your house and think that you're not tidy. What if somebody stopped by at 3 a.m. and there were dishes in the sink? My husband really didn't have an issue, but he was okay with occasionally enforcing my craziness about the dishes, but he really didn't understand why I felt the way that I did. My daughter, she needed to know why. Why is it a big deal? Why can't I do them after school? I don't understand. I'll do them whenever. And my son, he really was indifferent because it wasn't his task. Sorry guys, I lost my place a little bit. So this got me to thinking about how that applies to the work that we do. The voice or voices of the employees. And when it comes to the best possible outcomes for our customer. Do we assume that every user has the exact same experience? Do we assume that they're all using the devices or services exactly the same? Or do we assume that they don't have process improvement questions, or the support process with IT is so buttoned up that the users just know they're going to call and the dishes are going to be taken out of their sink? Or do we even ask those questions of the people who are using the devices? 37% of IT teams cannot complete the projects asked of them. So imagine if the ones they do complete are unacceptable or unused by the end users. It drives frustration for everyone. So my biggest mistake on a project was the first one that I ever managed. So my career was not looking great, but I kept trying and I kept at it. We were transitioning an application from, I'm going to age myself, the 32/7 green screens to a GUI user interface. We spent months and months building business requirements and getting everything documented. It was around 2002. We were super excited about the rollout. Not everyone in the processing center had a mouse yet, so we handed those out. And the look of terror crossed these people's faces. They had been doing this work in a green screen and coding everything using a tab key and the keyboard. They didn't even know what to do. But we didn't know that because we never asked about it, thought about it, or considered. We were literally changing their entire process, and we thought it was great, and they were mortified by this change. So we rolled out the application, and within 5 days, processing times dropped by 25%. Because the resources were forced to use a mouse and select from a drop-down versus keying a code, something they've been doing for 20 years, and they can literally do faster than like a teenager can close apps on their phone. If you've ever seen it, it's amazing. Within 15 days, we deferred back to the green screens. We redeveloped the GUI screens to allow for drop-down or the keying of a code and rolled it back out. Not long after, we got called into the project sponsor's office to find out how in the world this happened, why our project was so over budget, and what we were going to do the next time to not run into the same situation. So if I map the voice of the employee to what we like to call Syncgate 2013, I am operations. I want everything buttoned up, working smoothly, flawless. At the end of the day, SLAs are met, the customers are happy, we all go home. My husband is IT. He listens, but he really just wants to get the work done as it was handed to him and spec'd out, regardless of whether operations was talked to. He just wants peace and quiet, really. My daughter is finance. She wants to know why the project costs so much, what's the ROI, why people aren't using the new equipment or services. And my son would be procurement. Let me know if you need me to renegotiate your contract, get you lower pricing, otherwise everything looks good to us. There is no disrespect to any of these roles, but each has a very different focus of importance. And if we're not talking to each of these roles and personas in your company and understanding perspective and input and how we are tending to drive operational excellence, how are we going to drive business transformation? So what do? How do we get employee satisfaction, streamline build and support to meet the needs of the user, and ultimately operational excellence for the customer? When I worked on the customer side and partnered with Barcoding, Barcoding had an approach that I had never seen when working with other partners. They were very specific and disciplined about going through the process, people, and technology process. We talk about what the problem is that you're having, what needs updated, what needs changed from every perspective and persona. And then we talked about who are the people that are doing the work and what are their needs? What are they looking for from this project or this update? And then and only then did we come up with the technology that we would wrap around that. Here's an unpopular opinion. a lot of companies are doing this wrong. I don't have any specific stats, but if you look at the voice of the employee across most organizations, those surveys will tell you everything that you need to know. Including the voice of the employee early and often not only makes them feel valued, but it helps to build efficient processes and protect your hardware, your IT investment, and most importantly, your people investment. There's an entire TV show based on this, Undercover Boss. I am not telling all of you to go undercover and go out and figure out what's going on out there, but at the end of the day, the concept is the same. You've got to get to the source of the data. By listening and actually making changes, people will begin opening up about what's actually going on, and then you can continue to grow. I mean, all the episodes are hilarious, but at the end, there's always something that they come up with as an understanding or something that they didn't know that they're able to put into practice. When you're managing 10, 20, 500 stores or warehouses, getting the information streaming from the end users to the right people at corporate is even more critical. You can do things like hosting a hackathon or having a site-level information gathering event that will really direct people into a room and allow them to talk through with the people executing the projects what their ideas are. I mean, frankly, mobile users are really frustrated. And the users are frustrated. You can put all the time and energy you want into process and technology, and you're never going to get the productivity that you expect. Only 36% of management level respondents in our survey believe that mobile device issues negatively impact their business. 64% believe there is no correlation to the usability of a device and the ability for their company to meet their goals. When we put technology and process first, we're ignoring the primary input to productivity. What if we assume, because there's an organization doing inventory, that a handheld device is the right approach? Not realizing some of the scans that they have to do is in a very small space, where really a wearable with some kind of a ring scanner would actually be more beneficial. The user scans are down, quality is down, users are frustrated, ops is frustrated. Are we assuming it's the carpenter and not the tool? Are the ops managers discussing low productivity and missed SLAs and not asking what's actually going on and why? I mean, maybe the technology is the issue. Companies spend an average of $5,000 or 27.5 days onboarding new employees. The talent, expertise, and imagination of your staff holds the key to the long-term business growth. But hiring the talent is only half of the process. Companies often lack the infrastructure or approach to recognize the merit of their employee ideas and get the most out of their people. I can't run the video, even though I wish that I could. So if you haven't seen this, go to YouTube and look up the Meet the Fockers customer service experience. So here's a couple real life examples around what I'm talking about. Have you ever gone into a store and heard, I don't know what's wrong with this thing, it's so slow? And when you're in our industry, you're kind of like, sorry. You're a little bit more patient. Or have you ever tried to change a flight at the airport? If you've seen Meet the Fockers, you know this scene very well. Not only is old Greg Fokker here frustrated, but how long did it take this airline employee to learn how and be trained and be productive the way the system's set up? And again, if you've seen it, she's typing away and he's freaking out. My real life experience with this was in a store in the mall about a year ago. All the associates had handheld devices. My inner supply chain geek was so stoked. The ability to check stock and check me out without me having to go to the register at the front was perfection. So I get my stuff and she starts ringing me up, and then she stops, and then she starts, and then she stops, and then she starts. I can see the frustration on her face. Finally, she says, I hate this thing, it never works, and she takes me up to the register and checks me out. Most recently, I was telling our VP of marketing, I stopped at a Starbucks, and I'm like, this is perfect, I can use this as an example. I stopped at a Starbucks, I got my drink, I was at the window, I held my phone up to be scanned, and their scanner didn't work. So he asked me to take what some people cherish as an extra limb, my phone, to the front register, leaving my hand, leaving my sight, so that he could scan that barcode at his front register. When I talked to some people at our company about it, our CTO was like, nope, never. Nobody touches my phone ever. So it really put Starbucks in a situation where you're asking people for something personal to them because your technology doesn't work. These experiences led to more research and where the missing link is around the user experience. I should have asked the girl in that moment if anyone ever asked her if the technology was working the way they intended. I suspect they had not, because when I went back a few months ago, they were still using them and still clearly having the same problems. Part of my last role before coming to Barcoding, I was tasked to build a service management organization largely from the ground up. We were going from a regionally run organization to a globally run organization, and it really required us to look at everything: devices, PCs, data center, service desk support, you name it, around processes and standards. I won't bore you with all the work that went into it, although we can certainly chat about it after this. The business transformation has a hard dependency on an IT transformation, and vice versa. And what came to surface for us pretty quickly were the following four things. Number one, operations did not feel like they had a voice. IT made the decisions for them. I remember when we were going from Windows CE device to Android devices, we rolled the first site out, and the general manager called me or sent me an email and literally said, and I quote, "Why did you do this to us?" We all kind of got a laugh out of it until I called him and found out they were having all these issues that we did not consider when we were testing. The application screens were almost unreadable on the touch screen, and it was slowing them down to the point that users were fighting not to have to use the new technology. It's not a good look when we were literally rolling out new devices, completely replacing their old ones within the next couple of months. So we really had to make a quick recovery and start considering their opinions. Sorry guys, I got a little, okay. 2, IT is slow and always says no. So we're just gonna do our own thing. I remember the day an ops manager, and actually someone I used to work with is going to enjoy this. An ops manager called and said he needed a favor. He bought 50 unsecure smart sticks because they needed to make the monitors in their warehouse smart TVs. And since we didn't offer that as a solution, they figured it out themselves. They wanted to run customer data and reporting on these large monitors, and they needed them connected to the network. This would drastically have put our network and our customer data at risk because they were not secure devices. But he didn't know that. Why? Because he's an expert at running a warehouse, and we're experts at running IT. So we have to work together to execute these ideas to ensure that we're keeping the customer's data safe and secure, and we're also giving them what they need to run the business. Number 3, we're not asking or listening to our IT customers. Operations is the IT customer. They know what they need in the warehouses, the operations, the stores, and the trucks. And we know the technology, but they literally have the playbook for us to figure out how we're going to execute a transformation. We're prioritizing potentially non-essential projects over their actual needs. How frustrating would that be if you're on that side? Number 4, many times we're making things more difficult and not easier. And this goes back to the tool and not the carpenter. There is a fading line between home and work technology. Today, users expect work technology and personal technology to operate basically the same. The key indicator of the future of enterprise mobility is the use of technology on the consumer side. Those consumers are our employees and our customers. There's a strong user experience is the key driver for adoption. Wrap a service desk, rapid issue identification service around that, and you get to a strong store and warehouse productivity and resiliency plan. When an employee comes into work and is forced to use a one-size-fits-all technology where processes are fragmented, clunky, and overall not user-friendly as compared to, say, their Starbucks app, you're already losing them before they even start using the equipment. Our entire approach changed when we realized the power of this voice. So this led to a model with the following principles. Be inclusive of all voices. The last slide I covered was the end user voice. But again, finance, procurement, IT, each has a unique perspective. They bring something different to the table, and they have different needs from you and your technology that the others do not. This can usually be achieved by cutting the data different ways, but we have to ensure and ask for buy-in and make sure that we're addressing each and every voice. Every piece of input is not going to be some big idea and big life-changing efficiency for your company. But if we look at a group of small process changes that drives improvement, overall, you're better off. Push the work to the right people. Internal when needed, partners when necessary. People often hear me say, why struggle through it when we have the experts that can get it done? There are things that a partner can do better than you internally, or you should not have to do internally so that you can use your resources on more important things. But having that honest discussion without people thinking that they're going to lose their job is a balance, but it's very doable. Utilize internal resources for critical things, not mundane. Sorry guys, I got a little tripped up. Okay. Remember, only 37% of projects in IT get done. So there are a lot of people and a lot of work. Sorry guys, let me start that over. Only 37% of IT projects get done. So there is a lot for people to do and while your partner cleans up mundane work that is not critical to your end business. Consolidate your service providers. Less to manage, more accountability with the partners that you trust. Then they can talk to your employees as well. Help be the solution. 50 service providers means 50 QBRs, 50 invoices, 50 points of failure. See the above bullet point about mundane work. Find a partner you trust and invest in that relationship. Years ago, there was a push for diversity of partners. I would argue now that we're developing pure relationships and not just transactional-based processes, shrinking the footprint is best for all companies. This all seems like a heavy lift. So how do you get there? You will notice all the items in the new approach drive right back to labor. Number one cost for businesses, number one shortage right now is people. We need people doing the critical work, being efficient as possible, and knowing that when they have an issue, a concern, or an outage, that they will be taken care of. We asked a focus area of improvement. We asked for the top focus areas of improvement. 1 through 4 make up 93% of our respondents, which are directly associated with people. Hitting operation KPIs, reducing the direct cost of labor, improving labor retention, relieving the IT burden. Could we agree that we have a better chance of hitting operational KPIs and improving labor and retention and relieving IT burden if we ensure that all of the processes were being managed in the most efficient way? And all of the technology allowed for a positive user experience. They like the device. When they have an issue, they call support. They get help from an expert. And can we agree that if these things fall into place, there's a better chance of reducing the direct cost of labor? You add innovation and automation, and you've got it. By thinking of the end users first, starting with your employees' experience, you can craft strategies that both retain top talent and automate processes to reduce the reliance on labor where it isn't necessary. Unpopular opinion number 2, outsourcing is not more expensive, and your team is not going to be better or more efficient at the tasks. If a partner quotes you high and/or you have to tell them how to do the work, break up with them immediately and go find someone else. A full-time employee actually costs 125 to 140% of their salary because you're paying for hours that they spend at work and their expenses. Whether they're working on your projects or your efforts or not, it's a long-term commitment. Building partnerships creates a shared experts strategy where you are only paying for the time that they're working on your specific work. It's far more efficient and effective, and it's overall cheaper. Growing an in-house team is also time-consuming and the lengthy process, while a partner has the access to the expert talent immediately. And if your in-house team is already in place, building partnerships that can quickly reduce that team's workload to become more focused on digital and business transformation is the perfect mix. You simply have to dig into the true cost of ownership to get there. This is where the work comes in. It's not difficult, but it is time-consuming. And I know moving fast is critical to everybody in the business. Trust me, my entire career has been in project management, and sales and IT and operations love when you slow them down to follow the process. But in the carpentry trade, measure twice and cut once literally means one should double-check one's measurements for accuracy before cutting a piece of wood. Otherwise, it may be necessary to cut it again, wasting material and time. Scoping is the most critical part of any project activity. If we took the time to talk to the different personas that make up the business, we're measuring, we're listening, we're building, then we're cutting. We would really actually move faster. But why? After I get them the right devices, the right reports, the right technology, what else comes from talking to these groups? Additional efficiencies. It's like squeezing a sponge. You're just going to keep getting possible scenarios and growth opportunities on the table that you can build from. So it starts with questions like this. What are 5 things you don't like about your devices? What are the inefficiencies in your individual process? What would make your job easier? What spreadsheets do you update and why? Where do you have lack of visibility into data in a consistent and synchronized way? What do you need for things like refresh planning and budgeting, and how could those be presented to you in better format? And this is all like food for the baby, right? It drives down to what is your staff doing daily that is not driving your company towards digital transformation. You will get answers across the board from multiple areas around improvements, inefficiencies, wrong devices, manual work which sucks up resources, increased total cost of ownership, on and on and on. This leads to another big piece of that what we haven't discussed in detail. True total cost of ownership. True total cost of ownership is looking at the small tasks that are done on a daily basis that drive back to productivity of your company goals, digital transformation and growth. And many times it takes a strong facilitator and a new perspective to ask those questions because they don't know how it's always been done. For example, we had a customer that had a model where each operation owned their IT asset information. This was managed on a spreadsheet, which was shared across multiple people. The new device would come in, they would manually enter the serial number, so 16 to 20 digits, and other information. When the device would need to go out for repair, they would update the spreadsheet and track that information. We would send them a spare device, which they would also enter into the spreadsheet. This all seems super minor until you understand that they have 10,000 devices. 10,000 devices, 4 to 6 hours a month for each site. So 4 hours a month, $30 an hour is $120 a month. So around $1,500 a year per site. They have 300 sites. $432,000 a year in updating asset data into a spreadsheet. How many more inefficiencies like this are there that drive to that kind of savings? What can be solved by implementing the right technology, partnering with the right company, making sure we get the input from the right people? There's money to be saved. It's just talking to them. It's all literally just math. And finally, we'll talk about support. Raise your hand if you love calling a service desk or customer service ever in your life. I think that's one we can all agree on. End users don't know about, care about, or understand your IT SLAs. They have a problem and they want an answer with as few questions as they can to get it resolved. The person answering the phone must know more than the end user about resolution. Following up with a person with 100 questions, including what's the OS, what's the version, hit Control-Alt+1, all that other stuff, and tell me what happens, it's not a good experience. I mean, if we put our own perspective in there, if you call a service desk for something in your personal life and they start down that road, how fast do you get frustrated? The people calling have a job to do, so spending 15 or 20 minutes on the phone with a service desk is not efficient or productive for them. According to 31% of respondents, the need to repeat information multiple times is the most frustrating part. 20% of global respondents consider the difficulty of reaching a live human agent the most frustrating part. They don't like repeating themselves and they don't like to wait, which is not unreasonable. For growing companies, improving the customer experience, 55% of the respondents, and increasing operational excellence, 53% of our respondents, are the top initiative driving IT investments. Investing in your support services, procedures, and people pays off very quickly. Regardless of this is in-house or through a partner, support is literally just an insurance policy. We all hate to pay for it, but when it's time to use it, we're really glad that we had it. You might pay, say, $30,000 a year on services. You have a major outage which will stop you from meeting your customer's SLA. Maybe you get fined $5,000 for every hour that you're down. How happy are you to have experts on the phone that can do that work while your team is off trying to keep the business going as best they can until the issue gets fixed? Leaving your team to focus on running the business. I would argue that strong support services is the most critical tool for your end users to have on a daily basis, and those resources must be trained and they must be invested in. And guess what else? They talk directly to the end users on a daily basis. Are you asking them what the end users are saying? Are you asking them what issues that they're having? Are you using that information as a source to get back to productivity? So in conclusion, and mapping this all back to the PPT process that we're so proud of, use a trusted partner to build out the ideal model where expertise is needed. Get best-in-class support, proactive uptime, issue resolution and responsiveness, and feedback from your end users. Ask the users, be inclusive, finance, IT, procurement, support. Provide a path of input and feedback. Make it easy, and let people know that you hear them. Make sure the right people are doing the right work. Device, tools, and technology will fall into place when the first two are done well. And then you rinse and repeat. This is all an ongoing journey of growth and transformation. So I'll wrap with an update on Syncgate 2013. Hannah, my daughter, moved out in 2019 into her first apartment. She came home 3 weeks later with the complaint that her roommate was leaving the dishes in the sink. Parents always win, guys. My husband and Josh still largely don't have an opinion on the subject. And after 10 years of hearing every persona's opinion, I listened to my peers, which were my kids and my husband, and I've allowed them to give me their perspective. And while I still like a clean sink, I do not value the quality of my life on whether there's a coffee mug or a dish in the sink. And so I have been transformed. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Are there any questions? No? Go ahead, Peter. Yeah. So the question was, do I feel like end customers really know true cost of ownership, whether it's internal or external? They don't. And that's an exercise we oftentimes go through, like let's do a day in the life. Let's break your process down and see where there's little pieces and how those all add up to process improvement, quality of life for the people doing the work, but then there's always a dollar around that. I would argue that 98% of the time, you can outsource the work for cheaper than what you're doing it internally if you really look at the bits and pieces that go into moving work around. Yep. Anybody else? Well, my information is on the next slide. If anyone wants to get a hold of me, we're also at booth C8096. And if you'd like to meet us at 3 o'clock at booth C8294, we're doing an ice cream social called Supply Chain and Chill. So there'll be ice cream over there. We'll be with our Avanti partners. Come see us, introduce yourself. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.